Joining me on the channel today is Amy Noelle Parks, debut author of The Quantum Weirdness of the Almost Kiss, out January 5th from Amulet Books. It's a YA friends to lovers romance set at a STEM boarding school. Welcome, Amy.
Hi, it's good to be here.
And I always like to start at the beginning and explore your journey to becoming a published author. What kind of kid were you?
I was quiet and sensitive and really independent. I grew up in Milwaukee, so I spent a lot of time exploring the city on my own and lots of time reading books.
Did you have siblings?
Yes, two. I have a younger brother and a younger sister.
Awesome. And did they, were you guys all into books? Were you the only bookish one?
I mean, no, my sister is a reader too, although in the way that I think sometimes happens with siblings where parents like typecast them, I became the wordy one and she became the mathy one. But the irony is I now spend my life working in math education. So I think some of growing up is like outgrowing those labels that our parents give us without maybe meaning to.
Definitely. What kind of books did you like reading as a kid?
The first books I remember reading, independently were a lot of Judy Blume and Beverly Cleary. I think I read through both their catalogs. But the book as a kid that I read over and over again until it literally fell apart in my hands was A Wrinkle in Time by Madeleine L'Engle. And I think what I love there is not just sort of that construction of this outsider girl going off to save the world, but the way she wove science into that story. I can still remember her descriptions of the Tesseract and the pictures that went with it, and how much more magical it made it for me that it was based in some real understanding of the world.
And how did you go from being a reader who loved books to wanting to write your own book?
That was a long, slow process. So I think growing up, I did not think being a writer was a career that people could have. It never occurred to me. I mean, I've been saying I want to be Taylor Swift, it was imaginary. And so my entire life, I've lived in books and I have been a teacher, and teaching is sometimes really hard and really emotionally draining. And the way I recovered was through books. And then we got to 2016 and everything was just so hard that books weren't enough anymore. And so I started writing myself as a way of sort of more deeply escaping. And it wasn't until I finished it and I thought, that I started to think maybe I could have other people read this. And I literally I didn't have critique groups. I wasn't a part of online communities. I'd never heard of a pitch contest. I didn't have a Twitter account. So I went to the library and I got a book about how to get an agent, and I followed the steps in that.
Oh, awesome. Do you remember what book it was?
Oh, it was one of those, every year they come out.
The Writer's Market?
Yeah, and it just lists all the different agents, and it has little articles in the beginning about how to write a query letter, and that's what I did.
Perfect. So how long did it take you to get your agent?
It was 4 months of querying in pretty small batches, 5 at a time.
That's a really fast, that's pretty faster than you wrote in 2016. You got an agent, after only 4 months. So you are really kicking butt.
Yeah, it didn't feel fast at the time, but I've come to realize that it could have been a lot longer.
Tell us about the day that you found out your book was going to be published.
Well, so the day we got the first offer, I was in the hallway outside my daughter's dance class, and I burst into tears, and all the other parents in the hallway looked at me. I said, "I'm sorry, I just got some really good news," and I ran out to the hall. But then it was probably a week later that we got the offer that we took with Abrams. And in that one, I was in an academic meeting when it came through, and I just ran immediately up into my office and shut the door and jumped around.
And so it was, so you got 2 offers, which is also very rare. Was it an auction or was it just a?
No, the first was from I would say, smaller publisher. So as soon as the Abrams offer came in, and also my editor is really great, it was clear to me, and I think to my agent, that that's what we were going to do.
So pitch your book. Tell us about it.
Okay, well, like you said, it's friends to lovers romance. It's dual point of view. The heroine is a mathy, anxious girl, not unlike myself, who is really for the first time feeling stable enough and confident enough to think about having a romantic relationship. And then the other point of view character is the best friend who has been in love with her entire life. The other book I really loved as a kid was Anne of Green Gables, and especially that third one, Anne of the Island. And so, like, I think very much the book, I think, has an Anne and Gilbert dynamic where, like, everyone on the outside can see that these two people are meant for each other, but she is oblivious and resisting for a whole variety of reasons.
And have you gotten a revision tip along the way that was like most helpful for you?
Um, yeah, the best revision I think that I did to this, and I don't, and I mean, I do think my agent and editor are wonderful, actually came from an editor while the book was on sub. Um, and she said, it feels like you have this plot with a side character that belongs in an entirely different book. And I don't understand why your male protagonist is not doing the things that he's not doing. Like, why isn't he pushing this forward? And I think those two things radically changed the book. And it, like, the thing that I carried forward from it was really thinking about like why everything is included on the page. As opposed to sort of just like meanderingly, like people say, well, follow your character, what would they do?
Yeah.
But like real life is messily and not orderly, and it doesn't have this arc. And when you write a book, you kind of have to cut out all those messy parts and distill it in this way that feels like real life but isn't.
Yeah. How similar is your current book that's going to be published to the first draft that you wrote? Has it gone through a lot of changes?
Yeah, the first draft I wrote, and this is not even what I queried, was a single point of view contemporary fantasy. And because I wrote it in 2016, was a very feminist, ranty, angry book. And when I finished it, I was just like, no one wants to read this. But I really loved the characters and the setting. And so I just like went back to the beginning and started over.
Mm.
So like this book, it's like an echo of that book, but it's pretty radically different.
Awesome. And what's your favorite step? Is it drafting or revising?
I was thinking about this, and the truth is, I really love both drafting and revising. The thing that I often say is like, I love every single part of writing, and I hate every single part of publishing, and that like feels really true to me.
Well, congratulations, because you're one of the few writers who like actually seems to enjoy writing. Because it seems like very many people complain about it, and they're like, it's so
I know.
hard.
I find that really puzzling because honestly, I feel like publishing is so terrible that if you didn't like writing, I don't know why you would do it. Like, I just, it's like, I can't imagine, like, what is the good part for you?
It makes me think that maybe some people are kind of like the type of people who always complain about their husband or who always complain about their kids. It's like,
Yeah.
I think they just like complaining about things. Maybe it's a personality trait. And are you a perfectionist or a chaos artist?
I think more chaos artist. I think, and this is not so much writing, but I got my PhD while I had an infant. And I think the only way to do that was to like feel like good enough was enough. And I think that has shaped everything I've done since then.
So when you draft, you just kind of like plow through and get the words on the page and
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right.
And are you a morning writer or an evening writer?
Both, but not at extreme ends. I would never ever get up at 5 a.m. to write, and I would never stay up past 10 to write. But like, those couple hours right after breakfast and like 8 to 9:30, those are both pretty good times for me where my household is operating independently. Although since we've been in quarantine, yeah, it's harder and more catch as catch can.
Do you have a huge ego, or are you humble and demure?
I'll tell you what, I think that in my own head, I have a pretty substantial ego, but the idea of saying something nice about myself out loud makes me physically ill. So it's some kind of combination of those two.
Are you a plotter or a pantser?
Right in the middle. I tend to think in scenes. So I'll start writing scenes, brainstorming scenes for a book. My first book, I actually plotted in PowerPoint, and maybe because I'm an academic. So I would just put scenes onto slides. And then once I had enough, I rearranged them and started writing. So I don't do like one of these like beat sheets. Like I can't think at that level of abstraction, but I also could never just like open up a document and start writing, not knowing where I was going at all.
Yeah, what scenes come to you first? Is it like the climactic, dramatic scenes?
I mean, it's always the flirting romantic scenes for me. Even I have a middle grade coming out too, and even in that book, that's how it started. I think the most interesting thing two people can do is fall in love. So that's like always, I think, at the heart of my books.
Do you get like lines of dialogue
Yeah.
in your head and see it that way?
Yeah. And like the characters grow from there. So then you think about, well, who is the kind of person who would be saying this and who are they saying it to? Um, and yeah, that's how I build out.
And are you a character first writer or a plot first writer?
Definitely character first. I might sometimes have an idea about something, like usually some other um, like piece of media that I really love. And I think, oh, it would be good to do a story that kind of feels like that. But usually it's the people first.
And what part of a character comes to you and maybe grabs you and makes you think this trait or this thing about this character is going to pull me through?
Yeah, I think for my protagonist, it's almost always something that I identify with or that I'm working on myself. And like people will talk about, oh, you really have to be thinking about teenagers or youth and gray matter and all that stuff. But like I find, as I think about my own adolescence and my own writing, like a lot of the things I was struggling with then, I'm still struggling with now. And so like my character might be dealing with expectations from her parents or from, her peers or the school, but I'm dealing with expectations like from my colleagues or from, people at large. And so it's the same feelings in a different setting.
Was there ever a point where you feared you would never get published?
Yeah. For me, being on sub was the worst. It was a nightmare. I hated every single second of it. And every rejection felt like the last one. And especially, I said we got those great revision notes from that one editor, and we turned in the revision to her, and she really liked it, but she couldn't get her team on board. And that was sort of the moment where I was just like, okay, this is not going to happen. Yeah.
But you took the new revision and then did you go out?
And we went back out to a new round of editors. Yeah. And that's when it sold.
That's great though. So a rejection turned into a yes.
Yes. Yes.
Would you ever like to be famous?
I mean, I wouldn't say no to being famous. I think it's easier if you're famous.
If you could have any non-supernatural talent or ability that you don't already have, what would it be?
I think it would be like the ability to like enjoy running. Like I see that some people really seem to like it. Like it seems to give them pleasure in this way I cannot begin to understand. And I feel like I would be a healthier person if I could take any pleasure at all from that, but I cannot.
Love it. What are you working on right now?
Right now, I am working on a book called The Sweetheart Scam, which is actually, I said, I often take this other media. When I was young, there was this television show called Remington Steele. And it was about a woman who was a detective, but she couldn't get anyone to take her seriously because she was a woman. So she created this fictional detective, Remington Steele, who ran her agency. But then this British guy shows up and claims to be Remington Steele and sort of takes over everything. So I'm writing a YA version of that.
That's so clever. It's so funny. Like, I know a horse named Remington Steele. I didn't know it was based off of a TV show.
Oh, it is. And I truly, like, if you want to go do some deep nostalgia, this is like late 1980s. It is super cute.
um, Everyone check out the quantum weirdness of the Almost Kiss. Buy links will be below, and I'll also put links to Amy's website and social media. Thank you so much for being on the channel, Amy.
Thank you for having me.